My next guest is Brig Leane. He is an educational consultant and former principal of Fruita Middle School in Western Colorado, which under his leadership became a national model professional learning community. A veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard, he began his second career as an educator in 2000 and has served as principal, assistant principal, and teacher at the middle and high school levels in inner city, suburban, and rural schools. He's also been an adjunct professor at Colorado Christian University. Briggs' work has been published in Phi Delta Kappan, Principal Leadership, and elsewhere, and he's the author of Singletons and a PLC at Work, as well as a new book, The PLC Dashboard, Implementing, Leading, and Sustaining Your Professional Learning Community at Work. Well, welcome to the podcast, Brig.
Dana, I am honored to be here with you and your guests. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's exciting to hear a little bit from you about your books, but we're going to start off with the question I ask everyone at the beginning. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oh, what a great question to begin with. I think back in the early 2000s, as I was a young new teacher, I had heard this term PLC, and I had even had various experiences with it that I think were less than ideal, which kind of jaded me to this whole idea of what is this thing called a PLC and does it even work? And I think I got to a place where I thought, I don't really see the value of this.
Mm-hmm.
um, until I had one experience. I was getting my master's degree in educational leadership, and I read my first PLC at Work book by Rick DeFore.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading the book and thinking to myself that what I'm reading is nothing like what I'm seeing in practice in the schools where I'm
Mm-hmm.
working. And I can remember I kind of lamented to my dad, and he said some words I won't forget. He said, "Well, are you doing what you can do?" Well, at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I was a new math teacher in a building I'd been asked to go to because of its dysfunction. And the partner, the other eighth grade math teacher, they couldn't find one. So they hired a guy, his name is George, out of retirement. He was an old wrestling coach, and he didn't even he wanted a chalkboard. He didn't even like the smell of dry erase markers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to George, "Hey, George, would you be willing to try this PLC process as it's written?" And to my surprise and delight, he agreed. And so he and I picked something that the kids should have learned that we taught, and we gave a very short quiz-like assessment to see if the kids learned it. And it came back at 14% of his kids and my kids could actually do that skill. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember George slamming his fist on the table saying, "But I taught it."
Yeah.
And I said to George with some, trepidation in my heart, I said, "Yeah, but George, it's obvious they haven't learned it."
Sure.
And so he and I intervened on that one skill, and then we did it with another skill, and we did it with a third. And by the end of the school year, by the time state testing happened, he and I had done like, say, 14 skills where
Mm-hmm.
we'd done this little process of assessing whether they learned it, intervening with those who did not, and then, after a little reteaching, reassess.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, George goes back into retirement. I got a job as an assistant principal, didn't think much of it till the state of Colorado's test results came out that year. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a blessing. Our state measures growth, one of the things that we measure, not just achievement. And of all the schools, third grade through 10th grade in our district, the highest growth by far was in that eighth grade math at that school with George and I. And even the ELA, the English, had almost no growth, that was noteworthy. But the math did. And it really helped me become a believer out of the trenches of this PLC term that I kind of thought was of dubious value. I saw this is powerful, and it changed me as an educator, and it changed me as a principal. It changed me. I would never go back to not knowing what the essential learning is, having a way to assess whether kids can do it, and having a plan for when they don't learn it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Dana.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what led you. Um, had you started thinking about writing your books when you were a principal, working on becoming a national recognized PLC at Work school, or was that something that came after the fact?
Another great question. I actually ended up writing an article about how much this process impacted me that got published in the Phi Delta Kappan.
Okay.
And Rick Dufour read my article and invited me to the Denver PLC Institute. This was
Mhm.
like maybe in 2000 and I don't know, 2006 2008 or 2009, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
And so it turns out that Rick had cancer and he was unable to be at that institute, the first one he missed. And I was devastated because he was like a little bit of a hero of mine at that point.
Mhm.
Um, but that began my journey with Solution Tree. I certainly got a lot of their books, but I started by this article, an invitation, and kind of to go full circle. Here's a sweet thing, Dana. This
Mhm.
summer, I've been asked to keynote at the Denver PLC Institute, and I think
Great.
what a full circle event it will be to
Yeah.
to be on that stage. A little bit like pinch myself because I was sitting in the audience with two staff members when we went, and we were in the middle of such cultural challenges and not having clarity on how to do this work at the school I was then the principal of. And that was really kind of the beginning of this journey. So
Mhm.
kind of fun.
Yeah, and so yeah, you like you said, have been working and speaking about PLCs for about 16 years now, so or so. So you then started writing about PLCs. Your first book, Singletons, and a PLC at Work. Talk about how PLCs can work for singletons. I've been one myself, having taught French, and for thinking about orchestra teachers, choir teachers. Art teachers, or anybody who teaches maybe a subject that's has like one or two sections, right? So how does that work for those people, and how can they get the most out of the PLC, especially if they're doing it with a larger department or other singletons?
Yeah, well, I'll first give a non-example. An ineffective way to do it is to take all these singletons, AP
Mhm.
teachers, CTE teachers, like you said, art teachers, PE teachers, the band teacher, and sweep them into a dustpan and tell
Mhm.
these people to go collaborate in a meaningful way. Too often that becomes a colossal waste of time. What works best is, and really I learned this by out of necessity. I was assigned to work with a school in Arkansas, and I was going to work with them for 3 years. And as it turns out, the entire school was singletons. They only had one seventh grade math teacher. They only had one eighth grade math teacher. It wasn't just singletons in some of the elective subjects or the specials. Everybody was a singleton.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I was under a little bit of like panic. Like I knew this PLC process on the team level, but what
Mhm.
about at the singleton level? Well, it happened that my co-author, John Yost, and I had a chance meetup, which, I feel was like the grace of God that we met up. But he and I both kind of commiserated and said, what are we going to do? And so he and I sketched out some different, we call them on ramps,
Okay.
find meaningful collaboration for a singleton. And we have three on ramps that we kind of started developing, and we put it out to some colleagues. And before long, colleagues said, you ought to write a book about this. And that's kind of how it came about. But it really came about because there was a problem of practice with singletons that
Mhm.
kept occurring where, again, they were forced to collaborate in unmeaningful ways. And
Mhm.
these singletons sometimes they only teach the only classes that some kids want to go to school for.
Sure.
And the last thing we want is for them to waste time
Mhm. Mhm.
or work in isolation because isolation is the enemy of improvement. But they
Mhm.
got to have a way to collaborate in a meaningful way. So the first way we teach singletons to find meaningful collaboration is to find a um, course-alike partner in a different building and collaborate over Zoom or collaborate via email. Or maybe
Mhm.
they're in your district and you can meet once a month at the coffee shop. But that's one way to find very meaningful collaboration, which is someone who teaches the same course you do. And I think before the pandemic, a Zoom call was like Star Trek.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now a Zoom call is really not that big of a deal. And I even have seen some districts use Zoom calls for principal meetings instead of pulling all the
Mhm.
principals to a
Yeah.
central office because it's just not as big a deal anymore. So that's on ramp one. On ramp two is finding common content. You know,
Mhm.
for instance, maybe I'm teaching coding and you're teaching, say, journalism, and we're singletons, but we both want kids to be savvy digital citizens.
Mhm.
We could work through the PLC process and say, okay, we want them to be good digital citizens online, and we're going to have a way to assess whether kids can do it. We're going to have a plan for what we're going to do when kids are not proficient digital citizens. And that's course alike. And it's surprising how many things cut across different disciplines. Like I've had CTE teachers who are singletons. One's you know, teaching coding, another's teaching culinary, and they both want kids to make an effective presentation, or they both want kids to have a good resume, or they both
Mhm.
want kids to have good interview skills. And those can be very effective ways to work through the PLC process.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
third way is to be a critical friend. I mean, even though have never taught French, if I were a critical friend to you, Dana, and I said, well, Dana, what's your current essential learning in French?
Mhm.
You might say, well, it's this. And even though I don't speak it, I could be a critical friend to you,
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
though I had a child in your course. And with enough, in general, we all have enough educational savvy to say, that's not as clear to me, maybe. And how's that assessment attached? So we found these ways for singletons to find fantastic collaboration. It's really been fun to watch it go over 10,000 copies of this book out there in
Mhm.
the hands
Mhm.
of singleton teachers who I think are just doing a fantastic job, but need to
Yeah, and
collaborate.
I really think those are great ideas and how, they can really collaborate on those common type assessments or assignments like the digital citizenship, collaborating on maybe planning for something big. Like, I mean, sometimes it's also doing cross-content collaboration. I've done that in one school I worked in with PLCs, but I think, yeah, it has to be intentional, right? Into some of those guiding questions, but I would highly recommend listeners to pick up the book if they have a lot of singletons or a small school, like you said, that where everybody's a singleton.
And it's not written like every book you'd read.
Yeah,
It's a quick read, but it's really kind of just down to earth and nitty gritty. I mean,
yeah,
talking about, look, if you can't find somebody to collaborate with, here are ways you can still be a part of the PLC process, even if you can't find a
uh-huh.
collaborative partner, because I just don't want these singletons wasting time. And I don't want
Yeah,
principals to think to themselves, I don't know how to make it even because everyone needs to be collaborating on my campus. So I'm going to force you all to be together. Those
yeah.
are two things that are just untenable in 2026.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think about that whole meeting on Zoom piece. And sometimes when I was teaching French and, I was the only French teacher in the building, even 15 to 20 years ago, like I would sometimes meet other French teachers at other buildings during district PDs, but that wasn't that often. So I think, if you had some way where you could meet with that district colleague that teaches the same subject, if you have early, late start or early release in your district and do that as a Zoom meeting with that same subject colleague is a good use of time as well, even if they're not in the same school. So
It is. And
you
that's
also
really,
have, oh, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just going to say, it just the two themes from our book is one is that isolation is the enemy of improvement, but two,
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
collaboration's got to be meaningful to the singleton teacher.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It can't be where they're just going along for the ride. It can't be unconnected to their subject. Like a quick example, too many band teachers might say, "All right, I'll collaborate around writing," but really
mm-hmm,
they weren't hired to teach writing, and so
mm-hmm.
they might do it out of compliance. But it's really
Sure.
not growing them as a band teacher, which is, I think, a loss.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wanted to highlight your new book, PLC Dashboard, Implementing, Leading and Sustaining Your Professional Learning Community at Work. So you told me the book is about the process, making it doable and sustainable. So like you said, there are a lot of PLCs in schools, but it might not be sustainable or it might not be done in a way that's effective. So talk to me about how people can use this book to build a more effective system.
Dana, it is the book I wish I had when I was a teacher
Mm-hmm,
leader
mm-hmm,
and when I was a principal, because in 127 pages, it works through the three main issues that I find educators struggle with in the PLC process. Issue number one is they're not sure why we're doing it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
They have to have clarity on why are we asking teachers to move from a teach, 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 test, and then move on mindset to a PLC or learning mindset, which says, what's the essential learning in the next 3 to 4 weeks?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How will I assess whether kids have learned that skill? And in what ways will I intervene when, not if, kids don't learn it? And what changes will I make to my instruction? And so, too many educators struggle with they're not sure why we're doing this PLC thing. And so the book starts with just a quick review of why would we even do this PLC thing in the first place? But then
Mm-hmm.
the bulk of the book is the second reason that educators struggle with the PLC process, and that is they don't know how. They
Mm-hmm.
might want to collaborate, but they don't want to collaborate. They don't want to
Yeah.
waste time, but they need to do it in a way that's meaningful and doable and sustainable.
Mhm, mhm,
And so
mhm,
the bulk of the book is about what I call the 7-step PLC cycle. And
mhm,
that walks teams and singletons through Dufour's 4 critical questions with a little bit more meat on the bones, because sometimes the 4 critical questions isn't enough for a team to like know what to do next. So I have the 7-step cycle in a 1-page template.
mhm,
And that 1-page template captures all 7 steps. And it's done over the course of about 3 to 4 weeks.
mhm,
And that 1-page template is captured either on a Google Sheet dashboard or on a dashboard like in the team meeting room.
mhm, mhm,
And what that does is it allows a busy leader, a busy, maybe a instructional coach or a principal, to know in seconds which team needs more support.
mhm,
So
mhm,
imagine that when you got that 1-page template done, we put a tiger paw up next to your team. And a
mhm,
lot of teams call it not the PLC dashboard. A lot of schools call it the celebration dashboard. We're
mhm.
going to celebrate that team got through the cycle.
Sure.
And then let's just say that let's say your third grade team has 3 tiger paws, and your
Mhm,
fourth grade team has 4 tiger paws, and your fifth grade team has no tiger paws. And you're
mhm,
that busy administrator who I frankly think we fail to recognize the crushing demands on today's educational leaders. But let's imagine you're that leader and you're wondering, it's collaboration time, and you're wondering I got to make a decision on which team to go to. You look
mhm,
at your dashboard and you say to yourself, my goodness, the fifth grade team is not doing this. I wouldn't, is not doing this, or not, it's not working well. Something's up. I want principals to know I better go spend my time with this team, and not in a look down my nose at this team, in a way of let me go support them. Let me
mhm,
go find out. Do they not know why we're doing this? Do they not know how to do it? Or do they not have the time or the support they need to do it?
mhm,
And that
mhm.
is really a mindset of support. But too many principals can't tell how teams are doing. They may have their hunches,
Yeah.
but they don't know how teams and singletons are working through this PLC process. And they have to. They have to
Mhm,
know who needs more help. So that was kind of the impetus of the dashboard. And I have to say it's in use all over the country, uh, in schools that I've worked with, to the benefit of everybody,
mhm,
because
mhm,
it kind of keeps our PLC stuff in one spot with a few hyperlinks. And it also is such a relief to a principal to know, hey, look, here's some things we can celebrate at today's faculty meeting. Here's some things that are going great with this team. Here's some team learning that team's had. Here's some kids who didn't at first learn, but they did after an in-class intervention.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's really been a fun book to have in print and see it out there impacting teachers, teams, and administrators.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think, like you said, that piece of knowing, right, where people are in the process, because principals and APs can they can be a part of different teams' PLCs, but they might not always be able to attend like the English ninth grade PLC or whatever it might be. And then having that dashboard where people can really check off on things and have those celebrations is a great way to um, you know, know what's going well in the school, but also having that accountability piece if you do need support and being able to openly talk with your leaders about like where they might ask for more support as well.
That's right. And it's kind of like if Dana, if you and I were to shoot some baskets, or you and I were in a
Mhm,
basketball gym shooting hoops, we might be
mhm,
having fun shooting hoops. But then let's just say that a third party turned on the scoreboard and it said Dana versus Brig. And all of a sudden your point values are going up. All of a sudden, we were just having fun shooting hoops, but we take it way more seriously when something's getting measured.
sure.
And all we're saying is we're spending a lot of time and energy on this PLC thing. There
Mm-hmm.
should be some measurement as to how it's actually going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about the PLC dashboard. So It's really the book. I'm not kidding. It's if you're confused about where to start in the PLC process for teams or singletons, it is the book I wish I had. And it's you and I end up in these circumstances. I
Mhm.
work with educators all over, so I'll see how something's kind of working in Iowa or in Chicago, and then, well, gosh, that's similar to Texas and similar to
Uh-huh.
California. And I was just in
Uh-huh.
Carson City, Nevada. And what's cool is you get to kind of refine things. And this PLC dashboard got polished and refined. And I even got rejected a couple of times for getting it
Mhm.
published. And it needed to be because it needed more refining. But now it's on like version 7.8 in my life. It's the first time I've ever had it published, but I know the iterations it's gone through. And it's
Mhm.
really polished and smooth so that the person who wants to do this process and needs to get it right has a pretty good roadmap of how to do it in a simple and doable way.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and like you said, I wish I had that as well. Like we have the same like level of experience in education. We've been in that role for, this many years, and like as time goes on, books come out like this that help people, right? I wanted to talk about some of your consulting work. So you're in Western Colorado, so you work a lot with districts in Colorado, but also Kansas, California. So talk to me about just some of the work you're able to provide to those districts or schools, and maybe some of the trends that you're seeing this year in your work.
I love being able to work close by, and so I do
Hmm.
some work in schools and districts nearby. I
Hmm.
also volunteer in my own district here. Yes, just yesterday I was meeting with one of the high school principals, helping him with this process. And it's
Hmm.
I'm not very good at joining a PTA because I'm on the road all the time, but I can do the actual work that I do on the road with principals. And
Hmm.
I find it very effective when we can have a check-in about every 6 to 8 weeks. And sometimes I do that over Zoom like this. Oftentimes I do it in person. But during that, when I go to a school, we first off kind of figure out why the school has a need and
Hmm.
then build a little bit of a needs assessment. What do we actually need to have happen here? And in general, it's that people need to get better results. There's frustration. There's a lack of understanding of how to have meaningful collaboration. I mean, I'll go to some schools and districts where they've got early release time and it's a
Yeah.
colossal waste. And some of these schools have had it taken away from them, their collaboration time, because rumor was teachers are just leaving early. It really is
Hmm.
just lesson planning time and it's not being used for the purposes
Hmm.
intended. So oftentimes I'll get asked to help people make that collaboration time meaningful.
Hmm.
And so when I go visit, I meet with guiding coalitions, which is a group of teacher leaders and administrators that are selected who are kind of people who are up for positive change
Hmm.
and are the kind of people in a staff who, when they say stuff at a staff meeting, people listen. But
Hmm.
when you get a small group of the guiding coalition of those teacher leaders and administrators, and we learn together and we begin to say, what are we trying to do here? How could we have meaningful collaboration? And we look at this, do four critical questions, and we look at my 7 step learning cycle, and we see how that could be captured on a template, and that template captured on a dashboard. When that comes from the guiding coalition to the rest of the staff, change happens. When we
Yeah.
get organized as a staff around fewer things, not more, true change happens. So when I meet with a school, I meet with the guiding coalition, I meet with administrators, and then I meet team to team. I'll often, throughout the course of a day, have met with 5 or 6 different teams for 30 to
Hmm.
45 minutes, really troubleshooting what's working well, what's
Yeah.
not working well. And I always develop next steps. I'm a big believer in almost always having all right, what are we going to do? What's an action step we're going to do as a result of the meeting we just had? So I keep that with schools I work with. I keep it online. It's a Google Doc that we share. I call it my between visit log. And we just say, what do we accomplish during this visit? What do we need to accomplish between visits? And what's our plan for the next visit? And we just keep that thing going. And it provides just enough documentation and accountability to really help this PLC process go forward. And it's
Hmm.
fun for me because seeing so many different schools in rural and urban situations try to get this PLC process going, there's hardly a situation I've haven't encountered where I can at least advise some things I've seen work in the
Hmm.
situations people find themselves. So,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
but it's really a
Yeah.
joy for me. I spend way too much time on airports and planes, and so I just love it. I've got several, or not Denver, but Colorado schools that I work with in Moffat County and in Rangeley and Telluride and even Greeley and Denver and anyway, several are local, and it's always a treat for me to drive to one where I'm not beholden to the airlines.
Yeah, yeah. But I like how you said you're meeting not only with the guiding coalition or the instructional leadership team, but also with each team for 30 to 45 minutes. So you can really work on just pinpointing, like you said, troubleshooting and guiding for next steps and then following up. Like it sounds like a really well ironed out process that you're using with those schools. So yeah, it's definitely helps with that process. So we've had a great conversation today around your work, your books, and just how schools can, better implement the PLC process in terms of really helping both their singleton teachers and everybody feel like they are working effectively towards a common goal. Out of everything we talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I really believe that we need to keep this PLC process simple.
Mm-hmm.
And too often when we start the PLC process, it gets too complex too quickly.
Sure.
If we just simplify it, whether this is a team or a singleton, this is where I start. I say, you know what? What's one skill, one essential skill in the next 30-ish days of school that you'd be embarrassed if a kid didn't learn and you didn't intervene, at least try to help them? What's that one skill? Let's identify that. And then, well, how would we assess whether kids can do it? And think of a quiz like or almost an exit ticket like way to determine if kids have learned it or not. And then
Mm-hmm.
develop a little plan. What will we do with the group who can't do it? And oftentimes people struggle in that step, that intervention step. And I say, let's make it simple. Let's do this. Let's plan one 20-minute reteaching time where we'll try to use a different modality than the one we typically use. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we used visual learning, let's try auditory, or if we used auditory, let's try kinesthetic. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, let's just try it once. One 20-minute time, not voluntary time like coming after school to do it, but during core tier one instruction. And then if more kids learn it, which they will, great, but I don't want people to think you got to stick with it forever until you get every kid there. But let's at least give that every kid another shot.
Yeah.
And I believe that simple process helps our mindset move from a teach, test, record the
Mm-hmm.
grades and move on mindset to a learning mindset. And that's where we need
Mm-hmm.
to be. That's my work across the country is to make a shift in our nation from that teaching mindset to a learning of the essentials mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that simply enough, but boy, I liken it to a if we were going to play football, let's not get out all the yard markers and helmets and whistles and referees. You know what let's do? Let's just throw a ball back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And by picking that one essential skill in the next 30-ish days of school, that's throwing a ball back and forth. And then
Mm-hmm.
we see, wow, when I made that clear to the kids and when I actually intervened and when it was clear to me, more kids got there, more kids learned
Yeah.
it. And that to me is a joy because I think that really brings a lot of hope to kids. And it brings, I think, our profession, we need a little encouragement too right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that really, when we see kids go from, 38% of the kids proficient in this skill to we bumped it up to 61%,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is so encouraging. And maybe we learned a new instructional strategy in the process. We used a different modality, and now I'm a little bit sharper as a teacher and have a little bit more hope even in my work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
Well, the best place to find me is on my website at briglane.com. And my last name is spelled Leane, but BRIGLEANE.com.
Mm-hmm.
I have, just resources for teachers, resources for principals, it's a place they can get a hold of my books or even get in touch with me. So that's the best place. I am on some of the socials. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram.
Mhm.
But I'll have to admit, I'm not as good at keeping up with that as I'd like to be. So I post when I can, but I think we're all we're all busy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience in helping schools, guiding them with the PLC process and some of your insights on the episode today.
Dana, I'm honored to have had this time with you, and thank you for what you do for all the educators that are listening in. It really is, it takes somebody to get organized and do this, and it's no small thing for us to be encouraged by another fellow educator. So thank you.